There are plenty of videos on YouTube that claim to teach you how to set up a tactical belt. Yet when you look at those, you'll usually end up just watching another example from someone. With this video, we don't want to go into that route. We want to bring you a proper guide on how to set up a tactical belt and along the way provide you with some tips and tricks that you've probably never seen before. We did this type of video a couple of years ago for plate carriers, and that one was one of our top performing ones thus far. Now a couple of years have passed, we have built some extra experience, and we believe that now is the time to bring you all about how to set up your tactical belt. So in this video we will cover shortly what type of belts there are these days in the market. Then we will go over how to truly set up your tactical belt and show you every detail, and then at last we will go over our personal setups, but this in a way to show you some special tips and tricks and possibilities. Before we get into that, show your support by subscribing and hitting the bell button to stay notified of our upcoming videos, and also comment down below to help us with the YouTube algorithm. On top, go have a look at ReconBrothers.com to get high quality products and support this channel at the same time. Most of the stuff that we will show you here today is also stuff that we sell. And for you guys that want to start from scratch, we also offer discounted bundles. All your support is appreciated. So, brother of mine, any brotherly advice for today?
Well, if you are using any type of thermoplastic materials that need to be screwed onto your belt, like holster, pouches and mounts, make sure to Loctite them. Because if you don't, they will come loose. And this can happen very quickly because your legs and hips move a lot, and depending on what you do, this can be quite aggressive. Unless of course you like to manually screw them tight before using your belt each time, like a psychopath.
First, a little bit of our experience. With our shop we quickly grew into gear experts. This because we of course test our stuff and build experience both on a flat range as well as on tactical courses with renowned instructors. We advise and provide stuff to police, military and other units along with some other specialized ones, so you can definitely say that we have a pretty good idea what we're talking about here. So to start off, what belt should you get? Well, it depends on what your needs are and what you will be using it for. But in general, there are three types of belts on the market. We will cover them shortly as we have made a video about that a couple of years ago, which covers this quite extensively. You can find the link in the description down below. The first type of belt is a threaded belt. This is of course the most simple one available, and it is designed to keep your pants up, that's all. But the thing is that you can also use it to attach your gear onto it, yet it is not very consistent because usually pouches on these wobble a lot, they shift around all the time, which makes it very inconsistent in use. Lastly, probably the most annoying thing about these is that you have to attach and detach your stuff every single time when you put these on or off. Next up are the war belts, and these can always be recognized because of the fact that they are padded. They are designed like this to carry heavy loads for long periods of time and to stay comfortable while doing so. They have been around for a very long time and they work great, yet some of them can be very bulky, which sometimes may limit your mobility, though this one is an exception to that rule. These usually consist of an inner and an outer belt, whereas the outer belt with the PAL slots serves as a sleeve for the inner threaded belt. The problem with these is that also these can shift around and sometimes even ride up, which is not ideal. Next up is the equipment, battle or combat belt. These also consist of an inner and an outer belt system, but it is different than with a war belt. Here the inner belt goes into your pant loops and the outer belt goes over it on top and attaches through Velcro. These type of belts became popular around 2018 here in Europe. These are great in terms of retention because they allow to have everything nicely fixed in place, along with providing the same mobility as a regular threaded belt does. On top of that, the outer belt allows you to carry it just over a jacket without the use of the inner belt, which is neat of course. A bit after we made our video on belt selection, an improvement of this version got very popular, and this is where brands started to apply PAL slots on the outer belt system. And this is what most consider to be the standard for tactical belt setups today. Nowadays there are also war belt versions that allow to work with that inner Velcro system like this Hornet version does. With these type of belts, most manufacturers use hooks on the outer belt and loops on the inner belt. Yet some companies do it the other way around, like this one, which is direct action from Poland. Some people don't like it like this, but the reason behind it is to wear your outer belt over your outerwear without it damaging your outerwear. Also interesting about this one is that the inner belt uses less aggressive hooks such that it doesn't catch onto your clothes or on anything else. So that's in terms of what types of belts there are these days. Now in general you want to make sure that your outer belt is rigid enough such that it holds whatever you put onto it, because if not you will have a hard time with it. As for sizing, it is not rocket science, just make sure that you measure your waist circumference of where you will be wearing the belt. These days brands also include a size adjustable system into their belts. We recommend to not cut off too much so you can adjust in the future where needed, and also if you cut it, make sure to burn it so it doesn't start to fray. Do mind that your size also dictates how much belt space you have. Slimmer people may have a harder time to configure a full belt setup, though there are some tricks to counteract that, which we'll show you later. Something else that is important to talk about when it comes to belts is the buckle. Almost all are provided with Austria-Elben buckles these days, which are known to be very reliable. We also don't recommend to get a belt with a plastic buckle because those are very prone to breaking. Some of these buckles also come with a D-ring, which can be used to hook onto a safety lanyard or to even rappel with. And although they are being used for this quite often, the belt themselves are mostly never rated to actually do this. As far as we know, there is only one brand in the world that makes actual rappel rated tactical belts, and this company is called CTOMS in Canada if you require something like that. As for brands of belts, the US is practically saturated with this kind of stuff, but as for European brands, you have Direct Action, which we personally swear by. Then there is Templar's gear, which is great as well. You have also 414, Frog Pro and Ginger Tactical gear, which seems to be great, but are quite expensive. Black Trident is in our eyes overpriced, and some of their nylon gear is not that great actually. Then there is also Tasmanian Tiger and Helicontex, which are widely known, and they are pretty decent for their price. Personally, we would stay away from brands like Warrior Assault Systems and Pentagon. And then you also have Claw Gear and Agilite, and these we would leave somewhere in the middle. For the rest of the video we'll be using the combat type of belts as an example because we use these ones ourselves. So now we come to the part where we actually start setting up your belt. First thing we want to mention is that a belt is a highly personal thing, just as with a plate carrier. For example, my brother and I, we practically do the same things, yet our belts differ quite a lot when it comes to their setup. Though there are some general proven concepts that you can apply when setting up a belt, and for that we will start from there with this video. Second thing we want to mention is that you will always have to make some sort of compromises when it comes to making a setup. There is always something that you would have wished to be different, but that is just not possible. So it is up to you to weigh out what you believe is more important by actually using your belt. Third thing, a setup like this is not 100% static. As you progress and new stuff comes out into the market, you will inevitably make changes to it. Some stuff will work, some stuff won't, but that is why you will have to test it out. Now when it comes down to setting up tactical gear, we always apply 3 rules. 1 is easy access, 2 is efficiency of movement, and 3 is minimal stuff. Though for this last one we make an exception for belts, and this comes from something that we've learned from a military CQB instructor. He taught us that your hips can carry way more weight comfortably than your shoulders ever can, and in that sense you should use it to the fullest. This doesn't mean that you have to put every possible gram onto your belt, but it is smart to mount your most used tools onto it, especially if your belt is what you primarily use and your usage case allows that obviously. On top, if you use a plate carrier as well, it is also important to test both setups together because the conjunction of the two is also an important thing to consider. Think about drawing your sidearm or stuff on your carrier that might hit your belt or vice versa, and so on. As for what you should consider on your belt, there are a couple of main categories. Obviously you have your weapons, spare ammunition, then there is medical equipment, and then there are also tools. It's also important to understand the why behind every part of your setup. If you cannot explain to yourself why you need a certain pouch or a tool, then simply don't add it. Now, if it is the first time for you to set up such a belt, we highly suggest you to not lock everything in place already or molly everything all the way through, because chances are high that once you put it on, you will have to make changes. The very first thing is to size this thing empty to you. This should be self-explanatory, and if this is already a problem for you, then we think you shouldn't be building a belt like this in the first place. A thing you already want to consider here is whether you want to have your buckle centered or offset. Some people like it in an offset position to have more molly capabilities up their front. However, we don't do that because having something up front might also dig into your belly, which limits mobility, so we leave that up to you. Next thing you want to do is split up your belt in 3 main sections. Right side is your 3 o'clock, then you have your 6 o'clock or your back, and then on your left side you have your 9 o'clock, and this should bring you something like this, for example. The easiest way to start such a setup is by beginning at your 6 o'clock. Why? Because if you use a med pouch, it is smartest to mount it exactly at the center of your back, such that you have access with both hands, and it is also a great reference to build the rest from as well. Now, there are some things worth mentioning with this. If you are somebody that spends a lot of time on patrol sitting in a car, then you best don't place anything on your back at all, because it will be uncomfortable and also create back problems over time. If that is not the case and you spend short time spans driving, we highly suggest looking for a med pouch that stays rather slim in profile, even when filled. There are many brands out there that offer such designs, and this is an ideal example of it, which is the direct action med pouch MK3. Because as you can see, even if we put in a filled insert of ours into it, it is still quite flat. And also interesting about it is that you can easily take it out and put it back in. Another example is the direct action compact med pouch, which allows you to carry an additional tourniquet onto the pouch itself. A quick side note, we believe that everyone that carries a weapon should at least carry a tourniquet, as well as knowing how to properly use it. This is already one way to carry it, but we will mention other options later. As for storing a tourniquet, it's fairly simple, yet many people make the same mistake. They just take it out of the package and think it's ready to go. That is absolutely not the case, so let me quickly explain to you how it is done properly. So in order to set it up, you want to unpack it and fold it open entirely. Then you're going to take the end and put it through its buckle, leaving about 10 to 15 centimeters of material. Then the tip you're going to fold into itself and also then close it onto the Velcro. In that way you have easy access to this lip. Then you have the loop, and you're going to fold it into itself in a couple of times, such that it is nice and flat, leaving you with something like this. And then at last you're going to take the time strap and leave about 1 centimeter when you put it onto there. And this way it allows you to easily open up the tourniquet, put it over your limb, place it nice, high and tight, and then also have easy access to that strap, such that you can close the entire thing, and that is how you do it. Some other things to consider when it comes to tourniquets is to always train with a dedicated one. This is ours, which we've marked in orange to always identify it, because a tourniquet can only be used once. Also, when storing a tourniquet, make sure that dirt stays away from the Velcro as much as possible, because if it gets dirty, it will not be able to hook as properly anymore, and then it cannot do its job properly. Now, if we go back to the med pouches, we want to make you aware of not looking for something where you have to pull down in order to get access to the inner pouch, because you may not realize it, but it is actually very hard to pull down onto your back to get access to such a pouch, especially if it is Velcro closed. So we always highly recommend to find something that you can pull from both sides. For the contents of such a pouch, logically it will contain the most basic needs of a trauma kit, which typically are pressure gauze, hemorrhage bandage, chest seals, an MPA, rescue blanket, a pair of gloves that are not black, this to be able to see fluids, which is important, a Sharpie, shears, and anything else that you may find necessary. Now, as for shears, they are usually a quite problematic tool because they don't fit such a pouch generally. So what most people tend to do is put them up front somewhere in between some parts of their plate carrier, but then they have to secure them as well because these things can easily get lost. Another option, and something that we have found to be best, is to use a Velcro mounted shears pouch on the back of your Met inner pocket. This way you can easily access it when taking out your medical, and it is also very secure during all the action. At last, learn to use what you carry, because otherwise what is the use of having it? Next up, let's talk about the 3 o'clock, which is for most people the position of their holster, obviously. Lefties just mirror this stuff. Now, there are many options out there in regards to holsters themselves and mounting options. There are 3 main holster types. You have leather, nylon, and then Kydex or other special thermoplastics. Whereas the thermoplastic ones have or are replacing the other 2 versions nowadays because they are much safer in securing that trigger and preventing accidental discharges. Though there are still some units, like for example some Italian police officers, who are still using leather holsters. So the thermoplastic ones are the go-to holsters these days, and they can be divided in 2 main categories. One are for gun-specific models, meaning a specific pistol model with or without a specific flashlight, with or without a specific optic, and with or without a specific muzzle device. A Safariland like this is the best and the most used in the world when it comes to these. Other companies that make custom holsters are, for example, TRB holsters in France or Black Trident in Austria, which do deliver great work, yet their prices can close in on a Safariland one, and at that point we highly recommend just going for a Safariland one because we believe they deliver a far more advanced product for the price, if you can find one, of course. The second category are universal holsters. These usually lock in place thanks to a specific flashlight, but allow the fitting of various pistol model setups. There are some companies that make holsters like these. Some are good, some are just plain bad, like for example the one from Warrior Assault Systems, which always makes you lose your magazines. This is, for example, a good one, which is the Firefly from Bjorn Tactical in Denmark, where we work with. Beside the material and fit, there is also the matter of security, and holsters can come with up to 3 levels of security. Whereas level 1 is purely the retention of the material onto the pistol itself, and usually universal holsters do not go higher than a level 1. Holsters made for specific setups can go higher than this, level 1, and this is usually done by either physically locking the gun, like the Safariland does, or by providing a hood, or by doing both. For duty use, it is always recommended to have at least a level 2 holster. These days, Safariland also makes models with an integrated optic cover such that dirt cannot collect onto the lenses, which enables you to aim when you need it most. As for mounting options, there are a plethora of options available, but they can be categorized under belt height, mid-ride, low-ride and drop leg. All of these have valuable applications. For example, the belt height ones are great for concealed carry, while the drop leg versions are great to be used with vehicle use. Though they have cons too, for example, most drop leg versions have the tendency to shift all over your leg when running, which is of course not great. The good ones don't, but they are usually quite expensive. The ideal one for most applications is a mid-ride version with a single strap. This because its height is ideal for a smooth and efficient draw, and also the strap allows for an extremely secure system during aggressive movements. Also here, Safariland is very well known with their proven UBL, though there are some other better and cheaper options out there, like for example the Blade Tech Duty Drop and Offset, which also, interesting enough, comes with an included strap, which is not always the case with other ones. On the other side of the spectrum, there are also more expensive versions, like for example the MHA from True North Concepts, which is apparently also a very good one. One thing we want to mention in between is the mounting of a holster onto a war belt. A lot of people seem to be confused about this because it seems to be too wide to fit a mounting system for a holster. Usually these belts come with vertical slits on their PEL system, and that is to bring the inner belt outwards such that you are able to mount a holster onto it. Then there are also quick mounting systems that go in between your holster and your mounting platform. Some people have no clue as to why they would use such a system, but it is actually to change out holsters and thus weapon systems in a very quick and easy manner. If you want to lend a system from a buddy, for example, or if you have to go into a car and sit there for a long period of time, taking that holster off is much more comfortable. Popular ones are made by Blaytech, G-Code, Safariland, and they are all USA brands. Here the Safariland QLS forks have been around the longest, and they are being used most often by professionals these days. Yet, for example, Blaytech is bringing out some great innovations too with their tech mount, for example. As for holster positioning, this is mostly a trial and error thing. Some people like to put their holster a bit more forward rather than exactly at 3 o'clock, giving them a slightly faster drawing speed. But of course, this is something you have to figure out yourself. And then there is also the option to cant your holster a little bit, which may also help with that drawing speed. Another option to mount tourniquets is with a so-called tourniquet case. This one goes in between your holster and its mounting platform, and is of course great because it allows you to carry a tourniquet without spending your valuable space on your belt system. A good example of this is products from 1110 gear, but also recently Safariland came out with its own tourniquet case. Next up we come to the 9 o'clock, and this is for the storing of spare magazines. Now here we mainly recommend to use some type of open top magazine pouches. There are also of course bungee retained pouches and flap pouches on the market, but these are mainly interesting for if you either want to minimize the risk of losing a magazine or if you want to prevent dirt from getting to your ammunition in certain conditions. So why open top pouches? Well, these allow for the fastest reloads due to their ease of access, which is important for emergency situations. These days a very popular basic setup is the use of 2 pistol pouches on front and 1 rifle pouch on the back. There are of course people that extend this further to 3 pistols up front and 2 rifles on the back, but this all depends on your personal needs. When it comes down to the design of such pouches, there are many different designs available these days, but the most popular ones are either made by nylon and or Kydex. Nylon ones are usually very universal. These from direct action, for example, can take a lot of different magazine types. For example, they can take 9mm, .40, .45, 4.6 and 5.7mm. So whatever you run, they will work. Also pretty cool about these is that they have a special material on the inside that prevents magazines from coming out even when they get snagged. If you're someone that changes pistols often, then it is definitely smart to get something like these so you don't have to change them out all the time. Generally, we recommend to stay away from some type of elastic mag pouches when it comes to such belts because these don't hold so well. They are great for if you require a slick design for concealed ops, but the risk of losing a mag is far greater. As for Kydex type of pouches, these are usually made for a specific type of magazine, like for example a Glock or a SIG. The cool thing about them is that they can be canted, which allows for better ergonomics and thus a faster draw as well. Yet they require special mounts, like for example tech locks from Blaytech, which makes everything more heavier compared to the nylon versions, and they also require more space to be mounted on your belt. Then there are mixed versions that, for example, use an outer part that is nylon and an inner part that is Kydex. S-Tac is a very popular brand for this. There are also taco type of pouches out there, like for example the ones from Templar's Gear, and all of these work great too. As for the orientation of magazines in regards to the pistol ones, everyone that we know uses these with a round facing forward. There are also people that use it the other way around. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as you're effective with it. As for the rifles, the same thing applies, but we personally use it with the round facing backwards. Another tip that we can give you is something that we've learned from an instructor who has taught us a lot. And he, for example, mounts a magnet next to his buckle such that he can quickly dispose of a loaded mag whenever he needs to explain something. All the things we just covered are the main things that you will always see coming back on a tactical belt setup like this. Now, of course, there are also plenty of other interesting tools you might want to use, and those are for the leftover spots. Now, for the stuff in between or stacking on top of each other, you can think about, for example, a knife, a taser, a pepper spray, a handheld flashlight, a multi-tool, cuffs, a baton, chem lights, gloves, a radio, grenades, or a general utility. As for the placement, make it logical such that the things you need most often or need in an instant are the easiest in reach. Prevent stacking stuff on top of each other as much as possible because it increases the snagging risk, especially in confined spaces, and also limits your mobility when you have to go low. These days there are products out there that allow stacking while still being slick, and we will give you some examples of that in a bit. Then finally, when you have configured your setup, you obviously want to test it properly. Some good tests to do are to do sprints, to take a knee, go prone, or even sit in a chair for a long period of time. You can also do some burpees to test your mobility, and then of course dry firing and going to the range to actually use it.
3, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. Nice.
Having said that, we will now go over our personal setups and show you some special things that might give you some ideas as well. First and foremost, as said before, we personally swear by direct action when it comes to tactical nylon gear. In our eyes, they are just the best in Europe and their prices are sensible for what they offer. So most of the stuff that you'll see on these is from them. For this we will start with my personal setup, which is this one, and as you can see, the general idea that we explained during the video of magazines, med pouch and holster can also be found on this one, but of course there are some other tools on it as well. On the front left I'm using a Night Eyes S-binder, which is great for carrying my gloves, but also if I have to use chem lights during CQB training, that can also be applied on this binder. Some guys like to wear their chem lights on their back, but of course if you're using different colors you have to be able to identify them. Another good trick to do that is of course by applying some tape on some of the chem lights such that you can feel the difference. Next to that I'm carrying 2 pistol pouches and 1 rifle pouch. On its own there is nothing special about these, but what is interesting is the way of how they are mounted. Direct Action provides almost all of their pouches with their so-called belt loops, and these are mainly interesting because of the fact that they can be slid over your belt rather than mollying it, and the cool thing about them is that they also hold far tighter than the regular molly system, and this also makes them more consistent in use. On top, this allows you to mount a pouch with both the molly system and the belt loops. I warn you, it is a hassle to make it work, but this way your pouch is secured in 2 ways. So in extreme conditions, if one of the 2 breaks, you will not lose that pouch. We know some operators also use zip ties to acquire that double security, which also works. On my rifle pouch I have a quite interesting product. This is Direct Action Slick Dumb Pouch, and this one allows to be mounted on top of another pouch without adding too much bulk, which of course saves you valuable belt space. There are many keyboard warriors out there that nag about the factual applications of dumb pouches on their belts, and we agree with most of them, especially in CQB scenarios, but it is never a bad idea to have options to carry extra stuff, especially like this. For the professionals out there, this is for example a great way to quickly carry evidence, for example. Behind that one I carry a multi-tool from a company that gave birth to the multi-tool, namely Victorinox here in Switzerland. Though this is a generic one and we should look for something that is dedicated for weapons. I carry this one in a flap pouch such that dirt and debris can stay away from it. Behind this I carry my handheld flashlight, which is never a bad idea to have because half of our lives take place in the dark. At the moment we each use a Streamlight model, but we are considering jumping over to an MCH from Cloud Defensive for our personal setups. Behind that on my 6 I have a med kit as described before. What I do add to this is an additional chem light so that I always have access to a light source. Next to that we come to my right backside, and this whole concept comes from the TCCC course that we have done. The thing here is that when your support hand is no longer functional, these allow me to do a quicker one-handed reload. This because reloading like this is already very messy and you're probably dealing with blood and pain, so anything to make it easier is certainly welcome. So for this reason I have one pistol and one rifle mag up here. Another cool product that I recently added to it is the direct action single flat magazine pouch, and this is actually a derivative from the highly strategic Thorax Incock placard, whereas there are 3 elastic pouches up front that allow you to carry nearly anything. This is simply a single molly version of that, which can be mounted anywhere, and as you can see it allows me to carry an extra magazine or even a grenade whenever I want to, and this without the pouch itself adding too much bulk. Next up we come to my holster, and I'm using the Bjorn Tactical Firefly Universal one, which I've mounted on a Bladetech Duty drop and offset for that mid-ride height along with their tie strap. Then additionally in between I have mounted a Safariland QLS system in order to be able to switch holsters with my brothers or the people that we train with easily. Then finally up front on my right side I have my Fox Karambit knife mounted horizontally. If you're already carrying a firearm, then it's definitely also smart to carry a knife somewhere, especially for if things get real close. This one came with its own Kydex holster, which is perfect for this type of setup. Why up front? Well, it is easier to access and to reholster rather than having it somewhere on your back. What I used to carry here was a direct action tourniquet pouch, which allows to be mounted horizontally as well, which is also a third option for if you want to mount a tourniquet. Some use elastic bands to carry their tourniquet, which allows them to easily pull it off, though it doesn't protect the Velcro from the tourniquet that well. Also, elastic bands have the tendency to dry out over time, and thus you have to replace them regularly. There are also elastic tourniquet pouches on the market that allow you to carry a marker along with the tourniquet so that you can easily grab that and note the time if needed. However, we are personally more of a fan of the tourniquet on the holster idea. Now let's go over to my brother's setup. In general it is practically the same, but there are some key differences to it to make it work for him. The first difference that he applied is that he mounted a direct action hip panel L on his left side, which allows him to carry a tourniquet underneath his magazine pouches. This because he cannot wear a tourniquet with his med pouch. Behind his mag pouches he also has a dump pouch, and this one is a direct action dump pouch. Now what's so interesting about this one is that this one actually mounts onto the belt via the molly system of other pouches that are inside of it. Here he has his multi-tool and flashlight pouch, and again doing it like this saves him valuable space. On his 6 o'clock he uses a direct action med pouch horizontal MK3, which is a larger version than I have. And the cool thing about it is that it's actually slicker in design when it is filled compared to mine. Then on his right backside he has a similar setup for that TCCC purpose, yet he doesn't have a dedicated pistol pouch yet. As for his holster, he uses a custom made one from TRB holsters, and he can sit slightly forward, which eases his draw. So as you can see, if he didn't apply the tricks with the hip panel and with the dump pouch, he wouldn't be able to carry as much as he would do now. We're currently also thinking about changing his holster to a dedicated Safariland one, since we're now working with a Swiss distributor of Safariland who has provided us with these showcase models. Furthermore, this will also allow him to carry a second tourniquet on his belt thanks to that tourniquet holder. So guys, that was it for our very extensive video about how to set up your tactical belt. We hope you learned something that you can apply for yourself. If you're looking to buy something, make sure to visit ReconBrothers.com, and also make sure to test your stuff properly, because it will make the difference when it matters. Thanks for watching, make sure to leave a like, and you will see us next time again.